Hi, Lucas Werner again, from my website, Conversation Our Age. That is conversationrage.weebly.com. The R, of course, is like Toys R Us. And I do explain things to do with anger on that website, but the predominant reason for that website is to be a one-man dating site that expresses my ideas on age gap relationships more so than I can fully compel through OkCupid or Plenty of Fish. And the basic rundown is that I have 8 ex-girlfriends who, after me, began dating older men. And 4 of my exes were older than myself, up to 18 years older. One was also 12 years older. And 4 were my own age. The ones my own age didn't last very long, but the older ones did. And I've never dated younger women. I've been single for 5 years. I've lost 175 pounds, and I've given away $2,000 plus on the street in food. Largely, I give away snack items with a small note that I sometimes laminate, explaining my ideas and leading to my website. I used to talk more about atheism when dating, but now I'm talking very much on the button of age gap relationships. How if the male in a heteronormative relationship is over the age of 35 and the female is an adult under the age of 26, and there's at least an 11-year age gap, this provides one, the most healthy environment in the womb for a child, and it also provides the most stable relationship pattern based on levels of telomerase, which they discovered in 2009 that reverses the paternal aging effect from 1912 to 2009, much like Aristotle came along and said that the sun revolved around the earth. The exact opposite is true, as revealed by Copernicus in the 1400s, that the earth revolves around the sun, which Galileo agreed with, getting locked in the church tower by the Catholics. So what we know now is if the male is over 35 and the female is under 26 with an 11-year age gap, this creates the most harmonious pattern. And it really should compel one to look at the evidence of all other diploid species, including plants. You see, when an apple rots, it ages and then spreads the seed to the ground, and the female anthers spread the pollen to spread the female gametes, which fertilize the male gametes, and those are an intergenerational pattern. And fruit trees are diploid, meaning that they have 2 genders. You look at all animals with a spine that are vertebrates, you notice that salmon that are old salmon, older male salmon, attract the females more so than the men or the males their own age. And this pattern is replicated through every animal species up into primates, of which Homo sapiens, human beings, are primates. And you look in the wild, and the silverback gorilla is surrounded by younger female adults that are mate worthy, that they mate with him, they approach him because he's the stable relationship pattern based upon these levels of telomerase. And it only makes sense to look at all animals in the wild. A dog being older always attracts the younger female dogs, and the cats. All animals follow this. Of course, bonobos do mate with older females a lot, as do humans, but when they're breeding, it is always the older male that attracts the younger female. So it would be a compelling idea to discuss restricting breeding from males 35 years old or younger until they're 35 to breed, or even raising the age of sexual consent. Because what happens is if males are under the age of 35 and become fathers, what we know now from this Nobel Prize winning research from 3 medical specialists in the areas of chromosome research, and also Dr. Bill Andrews talking of his chromosomal research, that if the male is older, it creates a stronger child between the genetic Goldilocks zone of 35 years old and 55 years old. I mean, naturally, when I find this stuff out that is very personal to me, I cry. I did cry when I find this out. And I've noticed that, you know, a lot of older males are starting to hook up with younger females. And we really ought to look at this as a genetic disaster of the 20th century, because if this myth stood from 1912 to 2009, it does explain the industrial pollution of a mentally ill species. Not to mention the weapons of mass destruction in the 20th century being the most, bloodiest century of all time, even more so than the Royal Ages. The 1550s Habsburg jaw is really no comparison to the fact that half the United States is mentally ill. And also the idea of global climate change. The only species that is Intra Ageil, human beings, is the only species that pollutes its world and kills all life through industrialization. And we really should look at this as the same as allowing inbreeding to persist, or even incest, when there's no breeding, because of the fact of the genetic and societal destruction of our world by the hay flicking of telomerase abundance of youth culture that is not integrated intergenerationally with the older cultures, also causes spikes in rates of depression and anger, what we typically call teenage angst or mid-20s angst, which is a precursor to things like cancer. And short telomeres on the chromosomes, generation by generation of the drop-off of males over the age of 35, does explain things like bigotry towards older males, and it also explains things like why racist language and racist sentiments are so popular, the Donald Trump supporters, and also our worship of money with the Hillary Clinton supporters. The wealth gap now being quite huge. Greed is a mental illness. Hoarding of material possessions? Are you kidding me? That's in the DSM-5. It's in the DSM-3, which was released, I think, when I was a child or before I was born. Hoarding, greed, the wealth gap is so deep now between the rich and the poor that the billionaires and the millionaires really disregard everybody else. They might be the NIMBY liberals that care, but they don't give a shit to date the poor. You find the socialist chicks have a hypocritical nature of only dating dudes with cars. That's another example of how we worship money, even though we're a more progressive people. And we really should congratulate millennials for being very open-minded to ideas like socialism and progressive ideas, and trying to, even among the conservatives, bring in blacks and gays and women. Among the neocons and the neoliberals, also wanting to talk about issues of money. And we really should look at how the millennials are adapting and spread this idea, because looking at all species that have 2 genders that breed and mate and fuck and, you know, get married, so to speak, are intergenerational between older male and younger female. This is the diploid pattern. And if millennials can't date older men, then that does show that the telomere attrition of our species is causing a mental illness called bigotry, which is a sign of sociopathic behavior. And also the greed and hypocrisy among liberals is silly. I mean, you won't date a guy that doesn't have a car, but you're a socialist, or you're confused by this even being brought up, or even why you would support a racist candidate such as Donald Trump, or a classist candidate such as Hillary Clinton. Granted, she would have to win for Democrats to take over. I'm not going to vote, but I'm secretly supporting her because I want the progressives to take over. And I think more progressive nature will bring us more into science, where I'm at on the starship. So again, my name is Lucas Werner. My website is Conversation Our Age, the most popular one-man dating site on Earth, probably the only one. The website is conversationrage.weebly.com. Check your anger and your depression if you're a millennial, because maybe it's because you only hang out with other millennials and only date other millennials. And I'm not just saying this because I'm 37 and think 18 to 25-year-olds are cute. Granted, they are cute. But we really should look at this as more a science issue than a moral issue. But it is a crisis. The destruction of the environment is a crisis.